Bing bong.
This is the iDanSimpson Show.
We do it because it's right.
I love the dialectic.
His testicles became swollen.
Based.
Do not come. Do not come.
I'm gonna come.
Please clap.
Who's this man? This man in the hat. I'm gonna ruin this.
You're a stupid baby down, not me.
Please clap.
All right. Very good. Very good. Today on my show, small city organizer, campaign lead for No Amaranth Shutoffs, the Champaign-Urbana DSA co-chair, and Bloomington Normal CPUSA CU unit, also Lift the Ban coalition supporter. He's on Twitter at 213 Axelrod. He's of no relation to David Axelrod. Let us please welcome on Allan Max Axelrod. Please clap. Awesome. All right. Allan, thank you so much for joining me today on my little chat show. Welcome to Leftist and Chill. This is where me and my audience, you know, the degenerates sitting at the proverbial back row of class, we get to know my based and never cringe guests, and and what they're up to. So, what are you up to? How you doing, Allan? How you doing today?
Well, I was just banned from national leadership in the Democratic Socialists of America for a year, so it's a little wild.
Okay, that's real. That happened.
Well, that's the thing, is that's what the statement says, and
okay,
that's what we got. That's what we got.
Okay,
so
we're launching right into the DSA meltdown that people may have seen on their Twitter timelines. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's better to rip off the Band-Aid on that, because it's just, like, that's basically been affecting my wellness, the wellness of so many other folks, and it's like, that's the elephant in the room, I guess.
Well, I'm really sorry to hear that, Allan. If you don't mind, let me just pause you for just 1 second. I do want to make sure folks know who you are, so we can personalize this a little bit, and I want to get right into that. Okay, so I'm not going to hold you back too much here. Allan, as we mentioned, you are an anti-capitalist. You are a
communist.
I'm sorry about that. I didn't mean to offend, of course. You're a small city organizer. You're an accomplished accountability organizer, which I think ties in very nicely with what we're talking about today. I can't actually imagine having a better guest today to have us walk through what's happening. So thank you. And of course, this morning you brought to my attention the DSA message boards, which was an incredible experience for the first day for me on those message boards. What can I say? It looked like a meltdown, and I didn't realize you were sort of like involved with that a little bit more directly than I realized. Were you part of the Palestine working group? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
I was a steering committee member of the BDS and Palestine Solidarity Working Group, and I've got to say that the folks there honestly do really great work. I had been along for the ride a lot of this, and it provides some helpful distance, but it's also deeply disturbing the kinds of dynamics that they're being subjected to. And that, yeah. Sorry,
okay, so
go ahead.
No, I'm trying to think about like how we can frame this so people sort of have an understanding, and me as well, of what happened. Is it okay if we sort of like reel back and start maybe where this started so people can get a timeline in their head? Is it fair to say this sort of started with Jamal Bowman's vote at the Iron Dome? Wait, I don't even know how many months ago that was. It feels like forever ago.
Yeah, I'm blurry on the timeline as well, because it really does feel like forever ago. Jamal Bowman voted for the appropriation of money to the State of Israel crossing the BDS picket line. People, for example, pointed at AOC for crying, but she only abstained. Like, that's still not great. But crossing the picket line is a fundamental betrayal to the BDS objectives. You do not cross the picket line. You boycott, you divest, and you agitate for sanctions in a targeted manner to actually undo the apartheid regime that they are subjected to. And so when this happened, we on the steering committee were actually pretty apprehensive about doing anything other than talking to the National Political Committee, but we reached out to Jamal Bowman's office. I'm unclear as to the meetings and everything like that, but we did have meetings. And ultimately, it was the grassroots that pushed our formation to address this for the severe issue that it is. And when the National Political Committee wasn't up for doing that, we informed them that we would therefore be making a separate statement. It is not unusual for committees or working groups to make statements. And that's where it all began, and that's glossing over a lot of interpersonal dynamics.
Okay, of course, and that's just how it's got to be. I mean, we only got an hour here.
Yeah.
Allan, what is a steering committee? I don't get that.
Yeah, so steering committee is a term for a legislative body that makes the executive function decisions for a organization. So in this case, the steering committee was coordinating the logistics of and the BDS and Palestine Solidarity Working Group as a whole.
Okay, so if I could pause you really quickly, there's the BDS Palestine Committee has a steering committee, as does the NPC, right? They have their own steering committee as well. We're talking about the BDS steering committee. They one more time. What do they do for the BDS Palestine Committee? Like, what's their relation? What do they do? I'm sorry. Help me wrap my head around that again.
Okay, so we've got the National Political Committee,
right?
And part of the goal of this is for there to be specific bodies that can provide expertise to coordinate with the National Political Committee to speak in a national level voice on issues of importance. Through a convention vote in 2019, the BDS and Palestine Solidarity Working Group was formed. And the steering committee of that body is charged with liaising somewhat with the National Political Committee, but also to pursue the mission of BDS and Palestine Solidarity. Okay. In that graph, for example, you have the National Political Committee on the whole, but the thing that this diagram doesn't show is that the National Convention is what created the BDS and Palestine Solidarity Working Group. So normally, the National Political Committee can see fit to vote to create a body and make a charter for them. That is not where the charter for the BDS and Palestine Solidarity Working Group originated from. It was mandated by the convention, which is superior to the authority of the National Political Committee.
Oh.
Yeah, it's weird.
So, but the NPC is trying to get rid of this committee that was made by the convention, and so this is a point of contention, I guess, right? It's like, can they really even do this? Well, they think they can.
Right, and that's actually something that, if I were to pursue this conversation academically, okay, I would say that any controversial decision that is already causing attrition should actually be done via a special convention so that we can actually have structural and authoritative solutions pursued. And that hasn't been done. Instead, the National Political Committee has made decisions as their own body, where you can hear from other members of the National Political Committee, whether resigned or no, that they don't feel that justification is there. And as somebody who was a delegate to that national convention, I find it very troubling that the National Political Committee uses the mandate of my vote and the votes of other delegates to then turn around and do something causing mass attrition that we wouldn't approve. The whole idea of a special convention is there are extenuating circumstances that are contentious, and we need to address it in faster than a 2-year time frame. I believe we are 100% there right now. And instead, they said, no, we have the ability to do this all on our own. See, here's our vote. And you all are gone. And the interesting dynamic in this is I actually, I voted for the last decision of the BDS and Palestine Solidarity Working Group, but I voted against a lot of them before that, consecutively. And the thing was, I was trying to pursue de-escalation, as were several other members of the National Political Committee.
Yeah.
Those members are the ones who are at risk of resigning, the ones that were trying to pursue de-escalation. So at this point, the only structural solution that I see in the DSA, given these dynamics, is the ceasing of operation on this front to have a special convention to deliberate, debate, and determine, is it okay for these wide sweeping changes to be made by a body that is supposed to be composed of 16 people? There's been resignations recently, when only 19 ran. Maybe when we have a thin field of candidates, we should consider restricting the authority of that body. If you have a wide field of candidates and elect people with a mandate, that's credible. That isn't what happened here. And that's not to say person A is lying, person B is lying, person C is lying. It's to note that we have a structural issue that is also a vulnerability that right now is causing attrition, not just of rank and file, although that's where most of our membership is, but of the national leadership that inspired some of them. So, yeah, that's the dynamic here. There isn't a standard DSA process for doing this. Precedents are being set, and a lot of people are not happy with those precedents, which is why they are leaving. And, you know, I wear a hat in multiple organizations. I don't like this at all. I like movements, not banners. You build the movement, and you do not subsume a movement for a banner. And that is not what's happening here. People are beating folks over the head with a banner until they leave the movement. And that is not okay. This is how American leftism returns to the same sort of dysfunctionality that we had during the Red Scares. And we're not even in a Red Scare. When leftists internationally are constantly putting us to shame by doing real struggles and actually making substantive progress towards seeing socialism in our lifetime, we see this repeated behavior pattern that in a good faith interpretation can just be called not systemically literate. And I believe in other observations that abuse is one of the leading sources of attrition in organizing spaces. I have watched numerous DSAs fold. I've helped build some of them back up over this kind of thing where no grievance was involved in a lot of those dynamics. However, in this circumstance, this is a national organization of 80,000-ish DSA members. This isn't something that you can go and spend 1 hour a week at a Starbucks with another baker to like rebuild their local. This is our national infrastructure. Where will these folks find a political home for a big tent, mass movement, socialist organization if there's no confidence in it? And that's the situation that a special national convention needs to address, is that there is no confidence in it. We have large DSAs not making quorum on top of everything else, which makes it very difficult to even make sure that we can do that. So it's just a mess.
Okay, so I think you're driving home the point for me then, that the something that you're arguing for is that a national convention is going to get us out of this mess. There's just too much that needs to be addressed and I think you helped pinpoint it for me, which is the sort of lack of confidence. And as a DSA member myself, I think I sympathize with that. And this, okay, I'll lead off and say that I'm not 100% invested in DSA. I'm like looking at it from the outside in, you know what I mean? Despite being a dues paying member, the more that I look at it, I'm like, holy shit, this looks like a big fucking time suck. If I were to try to meaningfully contribute to this organization, I'd have to, like, I don't know, learn Robert's Rules of Orders or some shit, right? There seems like there's a requisite, you know, and that's I guess the price of organizing. But what I'm getting at is maybe it doesn't have to be. Maybe we can improve upon it at the very least. Yeah, it's going to be hard work, but there doesn't have, again, like when I pulled up the message board, the DSA message board for the first time today, it was just sort of a shit show, and I would like to think that organization will see brighter days. And I'm not here to like shit on DSA or anything. I'm not here to like convince anyone to not join DSA or to leave DSA. You know, these are questions I'm asking myself. But
I recruited a person to DSA this morning via proxy. Like, this is something that, like, you know, you're not alone there.
Yeah. So like, where I'm at is like, well, how can we figure this out? What lessons can we learn from this for those who stick around DSA? And of course, in order to learn lessons, you got to figure out what's going on. All right, so let's reel back and circle back, yeah. So from where I'm standing, and I want you to correct me if I'm wrong, the National Political Committee. You mentioned to me, I think before the break, that there are folks on the committee that have helped Jamal Bowman, you know, get elected, and that's sort of that maybe explains the tenuous connection between Jamal Bowman and DSA. You know, there's also the connection between DSA and sort of members of the squad. I don't know specifically which ones. You know, definitely AOC, et cetera, right?
Well, so it's not quite that they helped him get elected necessarily. It's very normal and healthy practice to recognize conflicts of interest in the scope of discussion and to do so explicitly. It's not been done on numerous occasions, and it's like we deserve better. And so, you know, there are members of the National Political Committee that are on the steering group of the eco-socialist formation that has renamed itself to the Green New Deal or the Workers of the World Unite sort of thing, or Workers for the World. I forget the exact phrasing. But the thing is, other members of that steering probably have nothing to do with this. And so I don't want anybody to retaliate or to do anything to what campaigns they do. But there is that connection there. Okay. And it's the dynamic of it is people were talking about the involvement of other members of the squad, you know, lobbying our organization on this. And as members, they have the right to make their voice heard. If we are an organization that values people equally, if we are an organization that values the grassroots over politicians who are supposed to represent our will, then I disagree with their lobbying having been a deciding factor for some folks. Okay. However, it is very difficult to, you know, get into the state of mind. We see this all the time in small communities too, on smaller councils where someone will pledge to defund the police, and they're really good on other issues too. And when it comes to the contract for the police, they vote for it. When it doesn't include the accountability that is necessary. It's not just about the funding levels. That's one part of it, but it's about what means can we hold this institution accountable? What means can we replace this institution and have something else in its stead? So when we see members of the National Political Committee being lobbied in that way and then voting a different way, okay, that happened, it sucked. But things continued from there to degrade and erode, and these members are hurting. And there is on the National Political Committee front, again, with that lack of mandate and assertion of a mandate, a special convention should just reaffirm that if they are so confident. A special convention should actually say, yes, we affirm this, or no, we do not. A special convention should say, and we decide whether or not to limit the authority of the National Political Committee when it comes to resolutions passed at the convention, if there's a candidate field below this size or whatever other legalese is necessary. Like, that's, in my view, a path forward for us to not purge our leadership, even the ones we disagree with, to not betray the grassroots organizers on this. Talk to a grassroots Palestinian organizer who has been critical of Jamal Bowman. That is, and talk to their formation. What are they saying in this? And what is the National Political Committee saying? If it's different, we're wrong. Full stop. And so, yeah, that's basically the path forward. But when it comes to these other aspects, it's just frustrating because to me, it's more of the same. A lot of these dynamics are scalable. And in engineering, we have a term for that. We call it similitude. It sounds stupid, right? Similitude. But what it actually is a scalable mathematical framework for testing things at small scale and to get an approximation of the real world results. A lot of the dynamics that I see as a small city organizer have come to bear in the national space. And it's something that people treat me like a goddamn genius on some of these things. And I'm like, it's just these dynamics. It's nothing super special. Like, of course, we got to talk about conflicts of interest. Of course, we got to talk about the overlap between organizing behaviors and abusive behaviors so that we can figure out how to project power in a healthier way. Like, of course, we got to do this. And it's not being done. And so while we can organize locally in a safe capacity to make gains, like my community is the only community in the state of Illinois to have a majority of alderpersons in favor of lifting the ban on rent control. We're the only one. That has nothing to do with national. That work is going to continue. The question is, can we make that continue in national DSA? How hard are people going to make it to answer that question? And I say this where it's like, again, I'm in other formations, but we don't have to say jump ship. Organization hopping is not a solution. If we allow an organization that says we reject capitalism, but also we are going to undermine grassroots efforts when they are inconvenient to elected officials, whether it's our own elected officials or whether it's the elected officials in public office who are members of DSA, that is not okay. That is going to be a disorganizing force, whether we're inside of it or outside of it. That is going to be an antagonistic force, whether we're inside of it or outside of it. So we cannot leave this organization unless if it folds, where we need to solve this thing. And I don't know that after, because this has been going on like a year and a half or something, I've lost track of time entirely. It is something that is wearing our best organizers down. It is something where people are using very constructed and contrived ways of presenting their argument, where they'll use terms like, last year it was strategy, as if we need a lecture on strategy. I've organized now a coalition of 55 member organizations with no budget, with no incorporation, and we have won 4 statewide moratoria, $112 million, and all that sort of stuff. We do not need a lecture on strategy. Then they went to self-selecting. How self-selected is their majority? What is the whole idea behind using these fancy terms and not explaining oneself? Behind using these sorts of obfuscatory things, like saying, well, now this official said this, so I'm going to repeat and affirm and say that whatever they said was credible.
Real quick,
That's not okay.
self-selecting, what's that?
So self-selecting is used to refer to a group that will isolate away from the majority, declare themselves to be therefore in the right on a matter, and then say that people that oppose them are anti-democratic. This is far bigger than any 80,000 member DSA. This is the entire Palestinian Solidarity civil society on this. This is Palestinian Youth Movement. This is National SJP. This is Arab. This is so many different organizations. And to then say that we, as the body that liaises with these organizations, that is acting in accordance with the demands of organizers in there, that has been increasing our density of Palestinian members, that has Palestinian members in leadership, like there was only 2 white folks that were on our group, like our steering committee. The rest were Arab or Palestinian. Like, this is just absurd, sort of saying, oh, you are self-selecting. No, that is saying that you are going to pretend that the rest of these Palestinians don't exist, that the rest of their organizing doesn't exist. And so that's their term that they are using to avoid introspection on this, in function, whether or not it's in intent.
Okay.
So yeah, that's self-selecting.
Okay, I'm picking up a bit of what you're putting down here. I have this feeling like your comments are meant for folks who are a little bit more steeped in the DSA, in what's happening here. Okay, so but with that said, I'm trying to thread my understanding in here too, so that my audience picks up what you're putting down as well. Okay, so let's reel it back one more time. We got this Jamal, maybe we can call it a Jamal faction, some NPC folks who are sort of like related to Jamal Bowman, and what was that? What was that connection? The steering committee? I'm not quite sure. I'm so sorry. It's not terribly important. But more importantly, there are also NPC folks, National Political Committee folks who are also pro-Palestinian, anti-Zionist. That's where the cracks started to emerge. From where I'm standing, I would love to see DSA take also a pro-Palestine, anti-Israel, anti-Iron Dome funding stance. But there's a lack of accountability with these electeds from where I'm standing, and I think it's translating into a bunch of wasted time, resources, revolutionary momentum. It's sort of like melting down DSA. You're mentioning, sort of like an exodus. I'm not exactly sure what that means. Are you saying people aren't coming back, or they're quitting the organization? Obviously, we can point to leadership that we've seen resigning. I noticed one more today, but like I would rather like DSA takes their time and energy and go like, well, what works? What is working? What is not a waste? And I think maybe that takes us to what you do, right, Allan? Is there anything else that we need to say about what's happening in DSA? I'm happy to make the time. I'm just trying to thread that needle. And please let me know if any of that was inaccurate.
So that's a reasonable summary from a first take on it. And so, yeah.
Okay. Did okay.
But also, like, towards this whole notion of holding electeds accountable, right? A congressional district is something like 700,000 people. Illinois is 12 million, and the governor is so upset by the kind of organizing that we have been doing in Illinois that not only does he like make derogatory remarks now to our folks that are protesting, like we had someone with a utility shut off notice protesting his press conference, and he was saying nothing I will do will change these people's minds or anything like that. And it's like, no, you can actually do stuff. We've been telling you this for years. And he had stared so much at me during a press conference that I was at, not disrupting, but at, that other press folks noticed it and talked to me about it. Like, this is something where it's like, this is a governor of 12 million people. I'm in the middle of nowhere by most people's consideration in a metro area of 120,000 people. That is that is barely a percent of the state. And yet we have this governor who has lied repeatedly on the record, who has just not done as well as he could with the mandate that he has to help keep people alive. We've had over 33,000 dead in Illinois. And in the context of all this, he's fearing a group with no money. He's fearing a group that has no incorporated body. There's no social media account for our organization or anything like that. We are a shoestring coalition. And so when DSA tells me stuff like that's not possible, frankly, I got receipts to the contrary. This is very, very possible. We have 55 member organizations spanning the state of Illinois, adjacent states, and we're pushing for congressional level legislation. If we want to talk about holding DSA electeds accountable and fusing with what I'm talking about, AOC sponsored Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush's resolution for public power. So did Cori Bush. Neither of them are sponsors on the Maintaining Access to Essential Services Act of 2021, which, according to a Republican congressperson, is currently going through the Finance Committee. They aren't sponsors on this yet we've gotten 6 congressional candidates to pledge that if elected, they will support this legislation.
Are we
And
talking
we're still
specifically about
organizing
I'm sorry, Alan, to pause you. Are we talking about no Ameren shutoffs?
Yeah.
So the gas shutoffs in the middle of the pandemic, they're still shutting people's gas off. You don't even have an account for it. You just have a hashtag.
Yep, because we really, we were formed during the middle of the racial justice uprisings, right? Who had bandwidth at that time at all? And so we came up with the lowest threshold ask we could possibly do, which was, okay, find one person who can go to a once a week, 1 hour escalation meeting, maybe. Send a bunch of emails to the governor to get started. Hold a membership vote to join us. That was our initial conditions. We've relaxed those conditions because the chronic fatigue of the pandemic is real. We're only just now starting to build up committees and the like, and that's because the pandemic's getting slightly better. Although we know that the Delta coronavirus strain arrived when the pandemic was getting better, and it made things way worse, driving us to the worst spike that we've ever had, which was driven first by Delta, then by Omicron. And so with BA2, we don't know yet. We have to be prepared. And so we have only now 18 months into this or so. We started in July 2020. Whatever the timeline is, we are just now starting to build committees. We are just now starting to build processes because the entire time we have had to desperately project power. And this gets to a remark that you said earlier about how it's like this massive time sink to get involved in organizing your local DSA and all that. That is because a lot of people don't appreciate efficiency. A lot of non-profiteer-informed organizing does not take into consideration the fact that people have very busy and burdened lives. Yeah. In my local, in the Champaign-Urbana DSA, 1 hour a week can help you change policy. We don't require this level of burden. We have an onboarding meeting to tell people how our things work. We have quorums. We have processes. We do all that, but we do not make it to where someone has to sit through a 2-hour meeting just to hear how they could get involved by sitting in another 1 hour meeting where they do work outside of those meetings where it's now open-ended and they have very limited ability to say no due to peer pressure. But that's how a lot of space is organized. So I totally get what you're saying there. And with no Ameren shutoffs, we've had to organize in the most combination of efficient and grueling circumstances. I ended up in the hospital due to this.
Oh, honey.
Right? So it's we know very keenly how what happens to folks if they don't rest. And so we are building out those committees. We are doing this labor deliberately, structured, and we are still passing resolutions. January, we passed a resolution through the Champaign County Board submitted by a Republican who held firm for 3 months while the Democrats tried evasion tactics A, B, C, and D. And then when they finally said, okay, we got a way to kill this thing, we stacked 27 public commenters, giving over an hour of public comment to get them to back down. That's how we get shit done. And to be honest, I don't see that in a lot of spaces. And it's frustrating because I saw that in the BDS and Palestine Solidarity Working Group. So yeah, that's a public comment related to what I talked about. Yeah,
there it is.
If you want to go there.
So, I mean, we could play it if you like, but I think it's more important that people understand what you do. This is a tactic that you're seeing, and you just explained how that tied in very nicely. Allan, I like to go to you if I ever need any help understanding, how to run or build a healthy organization full of people who are taking their own health seriously, because it is very taxing, and I appreciate your approach to that specifically. So what I wanted to do is continue to ask about, I think, what you termed for me, which is accountability organizing. In our previous talk, I think that was just November. Was it really November? It feels like so long ago, right? You told us about how you were a thorn in many electeds' side, and because of that, you helped to strengthen the utility disconnection avoidance program, and because of that, people kept their utilities on. Can you real quickly hit on some of those numbers? Because it's just, I just think about all of this time and energy going into this, I don't want to call it drama, because hopefully the organization is going through growing pains, or I don't know, hopefully they're learning from this is what I'm getting at. But of course I don't want to minimize it. What am I getting at here? It's so much time and energy is going into that, and I look at what you do, and you post fucking real numbers. Why don't we talk about that? We'll talk about your straight man approach, which you talked about to me last time, and yeah, we'll just go from there, okay? But
sure thing.
Yeah, go for it. I'll re-ask any question I need to ask, but I know I just said a bunch of different stuff. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So regarding no amortized shutoffs, we won 4 statewide moratoria, as I said before,
right.
That stopped utility shutoffs or reduced utility shutoffs. There was one that wasn't a blanket protection. During that, over 80,000 households were disconnected. We ended up digging through the governor's documents and finding a rather substantial financial conflict of interest that got reporting on involving Berkshire Hathaway, where he inherited upwards of 24% of his wealth at the time. It's probably more now. And the thing is that after that, the moratorium lapsed in April of 2021. And we then had the governor come on April 5th to the city of Champaign saying that he hoped to break the current spike that we were facing using vaccines for the first time ever. We, that same night, passed a resolution out of committee at the Urbana City Council. He tends to show up when we're passing legislation, to say that he needs to stop utility shutoffs, and that and we needed to pass statewide legislation to release funds. The city of Bloomington followed suit. They passed a resolution right afterwards. They started with an initiative. This is on April 19th. April 22nd, that is 17 days after Governor Pritzker came to my metro area, said that he was only going to use vaccines. And he basically said, well, I found $80 million to help people out. And we knew that wasn't enough. The numbers showed that wasn't enough. And so what we ended up doing, because he said that was for 80,000 households. 80,000 households have been disconnected before that. That number was higher then, and it was getting higher currently, contemporarily. And so what ended up happening was we got a FOIA, or we actually looked at the governor's press releases. where he was talking about the number of people who got on the Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, otherwise known as LIHEAP. And we noticed that it was substantially lower than the most recent season before the pandemic, despite the fact that he had increased the funds for it, despite the fact that he had said, like, look at all the ways that we're promoting this program. We're such a good liberal government. And that, plus the resolutions pointing out those numbers, telling him to act, helped us to expand that, not only to get the initial 80 million, but to then expand that to 120 million declared. They only spent 112 million of that money. But the thing is that utility disconnections were allowed to happen. And it unfortunately seemed that during the time of that program, it was only affecting less vulnerable households. And so it did not have a substantial impact on our caseloads. But in July, that program expired, where this money was no longer being given out. That's why they didn't spend it all. And 2 weeks into July, we see this a lot, our COVID case numbers started to increase. And we, by August 3rd, had over 205 days of over 2,000 cases a day in Illinois. You cannot tell me that this is seasonal. And in the context of all that, we managed to stop Ameren from utility shutoffs. They try to say that it is the winter moratorium. The weather allowed them to do it. When I talked to members on the Stakeholders Council at the Illinois Commerce Commission, that's the body that regulates them, they said, it looks like Ameren doesn't want to give you the publicity, and it looks like they don't want the liability. And so instead, they've been issuing notices that people have failed their deferred payment agreement. They did not shut off anybody in December. They did not shut anybody off in January. And we just got the data. I'm confident that it will show that we didn't shut off anybody. They didn't shut off anybody in February. But the problem is that water utilities have been shutting people off this entire time. Power utilities just do it faster. And so we have continued water shutoffs, BA2 already in central Illinois and the rest of Illinois, where it is increasing in New York. We don't know if the overall caseloads are going to spike. This is not ideal. This is not what the 2007 Congressional Research Plan said to do. They said keep the protections in place until the pandemic is gone. The pandemic is gone when we have a spike that's less severe than the most recent spike. We haven't had that. 2020 was not as bad as 2020 to 2021 in the fall, was not as bad as 2021 to 2022. We have not had a pandemic decrease in severity. We've had deaths increase. We're over 900,000 in the country. And so that's some of the numbers. But one of the things that I had broken and that we expect to win more money on is that we are on track to have a significant drop in the number of LIHEAP recipients yet again, even after the state passed legislation to increase the accessibility of LIHEAP, even after they increased the funding yet again. And you bet your ass we are going to be passing resolutions in different political bodies calling that out and inducing the principled liability upon the governor until he issues those funds. And our organization started as 8-member organizations. I can't state this enough. I brought them all together with an email saying, hey guys, this is bad. Can someone else take care of this? And no one was up for it. That's how I became campaign lead. This isn't me self-flatulating and saying, look at how people have died. I did not know anything about utilities before this. I didn't know much about the pandemic. I didn't even take COVID seriously before it arrived. When it arrived, I understood. When I saw what the documentation said from the state government's office, I understood. When I got the disconnection notice, I understood. And the reality of the situation is that people are so used to bad faith behavior among self-proclaimed activists that emerge in other formations that it is hard for people to conceive that that isn't happening here. And despite that, we have continued to recruit more member organizations from 8 to 55. This is the largest our coalition's ever been. We have had to purge organizations from us before, and we're likely going to be removing one soon, unfortunately. But it's for really good reasons. It's not because I am upset at somebody. It's not because of anything personal. It is because we believe in trust survivors. It is because we seriously consider abuse. And so, yeah, I think you're aware of what has been going on in the People's Party.
Only like very tangentially. It doesn't look pretty.
The person who is somewhat involved as the victim was somebody who I actually had a very unpleasant phone call with once, where they actually did a really good job. And this is the thing that I am tired of seeing, where there are people who actually do really good work, who believe in what they're doing, and then get the floor pulled out from under them. What happened back then was that I was accused of being COINTELPRO by someone who was unhappy that I was discouraging a local coalition from becoming a 501c3 nonprofit because I noted it would restrict their voice from actually realizing their demands because of partisan elections.
Okay.
And sorry, that's an alarm that I have generally.
Hey guys.
Yep.
And basically, they had to replace a person over this. I requested mediation. They did a very good job at debriefing me on what had happened, on talking about the next steps, on whatnot. And the other person, unfortunately, didn't want to have anything to do with that. And I think they deserve a right to privacy, though. And, these are the folks that we should be recruiting into trustworthy organizations. And we have been. And it's not been adversarial. And it's not been before this. We talked to these folks. We said, we feel your pain. We've been organizing in solidarity with you. Do you want to join us? And these folks have been saying yes. I don't know about on the national level. I'm speaking mostly in the local regional level. But the thing is that when it comes to how Palestinians organize, they vouch for folks. When there's someone unknown in there, they will say, can anyone vouch for them? That is very much the same that we do in other spaces too. That is one of the better practices than pointing to authority in a situation where there is a crisis of confidence in the mission of an organization. So, I'm happy at what a lot of different Illinois DSAs are doing.
Okay.
I really am.
In response to what's happening now?
No.
Just in general?
Right. Yeah, it takes time to set those things up. This is something that is super quick. And so, I put in my request, but we were also going to meet anyway. So whether or not we meet sooner or whatnot, this is going to be part of the conversation. But the work that the West Suburban Illinois DSA is doing, that the Quad Cities DSA is doing, that the Peoria DSA is doing, that their work is really impactful. Their thoughtfulness in how they're engaging with folks is really inspiring. To see folks that are operating at the level that one would expect of Chicago DSA, and where, I don't want to get into much. I am friends with a lot of folks in Chicago DSA, and it pains me to see some of the stuff happening there, and I hope that they get through it. I have more hope for them than I do for national in the current situation without a special national convention.
All right. So can we talk about that really quickly so people can get an idea in their head what that would mean? And maybe I could pull up that that chart again, but a special convention would include what? Each local literally electing folks to go to the delegation. I'm sorry, to go to to go to the convention, and then they would be voting on new. They would, number one, be like looking back at the NPC decisions that they've made, probably the most controversial ones, and making decisions on those, maybe within certain framework, maybe deciding new framework for what the NPC can do moving forward. But the overall thing is that the convention supersedes the NPC, and that's sort of one of the things that's gotten us into this problem in the first place. And it seems like maybe the only thing that could get us out of it. Is that sort of the idea here?
Sort of.
Okay.
So
yeah.
let's also go back just for a moment on something that you had said a while ago about like how burdensome some of this is. The National Convention, as it's currently done, is a really burdensome thing. Like, you have to be super studious looking at every single resolution and doing your organizing months in advance of the convention to have a realistic chance of passing something. So this is not something where you can go, show up, and vote and go, my, isn't that interesting? Let's consider this person's point of view. My, isn't that interesting? And vote on something. And that's because it's a fire hose of a bunch of legislation that we are sitting on for 2 years and saying, like, please, oh, please make this change. And so it's just this rapid fire thing. Like, people on various sides of this will note that the convention has passed contradictory things. No, duh, in those circumstances, you'll pass contradictory things. Yeah. So the point of a special national convention would be to have the deliberative time necessary for rectifying the contradictions that are present. The contradictions that are present due to resolutions, the contradictions that are present due to the controversies around these votes. That is why that mechanism exists. And the thing is that in this particular case, the thing that would most usefully stem the bleeding of the national DSA, because if the folks that are happy about the situation right now were so good at organizing, we would have met DSA to 100K. We wouldn't be shrinking right now. You have to be data driven in how you look at this, not just satisfied in the results for your factions. And so in the scope of this, we do have a very serious issue that requires deliberations, disclosures, investigations. And we're not going to get that without having the ability to institutionally pause the decision-making in this direction. And I would be confident in saying that if you ask Palestinian movement allies what they think we should be doing, and to present them the options that are available, which is go on right ahead, wait 2 years for the next convention, recall the NPC, or do a special national convention or other forms of disruption, I think that they would also say that we should be doing a special national convention. We are making an embarrassment of the American left after other organizations already had that role. That is not okay when we are in the imperial core. That is not okay when we are in a country that has such low voter participation and then calling countries with higher voter participations authoritarian. You know, like, one of the things that I keep thinking about is that Fidel Castro was in a country of 11 million people. You know, he's dead. Illinois is 12 million people. What is our excuse for not having the same level of participatory democracy led by marginalized working class folks? Because the majority is more marginalized and allegedly dead. Oh my God, I love you. The thing is that we deserve a movement that takes us seriously. We deserve a movement that maintains strong international connections with organizations engaged in the struggle. We deserve an organization that prioritizes people that prioritizes grassroots initiatives that are indicative of core socialistic values over an elected being embarrassed. because it wasn't just the expellment of Bowman that was on the table. There was this idea of also a censure, not censor, censure, which is basically a public reprimand that is tied to a disciplinary process that could lead to expulsion. And instead, a whole new category was invented where they said that something was bad. They said it in more honest terms, a little. But the thing is that we do not have in the DSA right now an organization whose leadership has been encouraging and fostering a growing level of trust in the membership, or from the membership. That is, more members trusting them. It's reflective on our numbers. Members aren't leaving the DSA just because they disagree with their local. I know people that are affiliating with their national. So, or disaffiliating with their local just to participate in the national level stuff. And I can say from experience, one of the hardest things for me to recruit people has been the national DSA. There are people who participate in our meetings in the non-member capacity. There are people who will show up and public comment in solidarity with us on our demands, or show up at a canvass or a protest, and they won't join. They won't because of the trust issues that are just at their zenith right now. We need to restore trust. And again, if the folks truly believe that they have a mandate, then they should be also in agreement that we should be doing a national convention to put the issue to bed. Because what they're doing has not put the issue to bed. It has grown. And depending on who you talk to, people are uncertain on the intent on that. I do not feel comfortable commenting on intent. I say that it is possible for people to be downstream informatically of folks that are less than honestly representing information, to then induce a much more severe conflict than is necessary. I have seen it before. And so what we need from our leadership is the humility to say, these were tough decisions. We need to ensure membership can trust us. So we will have a process by which the locals can then vote on stuff above us. Because that's one of the things that leaders are supposed to do. This is one of the things that I do, is when we vote on something in CUDSA and I have a conflict of interest, I abstain. When I disagree with something that is voted on and there is authority from somebody else, like a member brought up something, I wasn't happy about it, and it passed, or there was something that I wanted and I thought we truly needed and it failed, still abide by it. And I told the National Political Committee that as well. I'm willing to accept the accountability here. No longer involved in national for a year. That's fine. No Iron Shutoffs isn't a national formation of DSA. CUDSA is not. They assured me that it is not applied. And so I'm able to do the same kind of organizing that I've always done. But it's not just about my local, and it's not just about the state of Illinois, and it's not just about the pandemic, because the pandemic will go away someday, where we can honestly say the data shows that it's gone, that it's not coming back, or that it's not coming back in a way that is going to kill so many people. But when it comes to movement issues like this, when it comes to will the DSA be a trustworthy organization, you cannot wait out that answer. You cannot so easily recruit people who have made the decision to leave your organization. I know this also from experience. There are really, really good folks in Central Illinois who have had to leave their local in the absence of sufficient accountability mechanisms. I'm not going to say more than that on their front, but they to this day have not re-affiliated. Despite the fact that they're in solidarity with the stuff that I'm doing, despite the fact that most of my organizing occurs in DSA, despite the fact that they will, set their whole day aside to drive between a dozen different neighborhoods just to collect petition signatures because they understand that it's important to an initiative. And those are the people who are having this crisis of confidence of the DSA National Political Committee. So we need to treat this like the urgent issue that it is. If there's another national campaign, that can happen in tandem. In tandem with all this, I'm still campaign lead of No Hammer Shutoffs. We've still been making gains on this. We didn't have 6 members signed on to sponsor the Maintaining Access to Essential Services Act, 6 congressional candidates. I'm sorry. We didn't have that in January. We didn't have that in February. This is stuff we're actively working on. And so to the folks that say that I've got these other commitments, we're not going to put it on pause just because you have a national convention or anything like that. And no one said that to me, to be clear, but this is inoculation, just like so many other people have probably been doing. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. I believe in you. The thing is that the amount of effort that has been put towards derailing the BDS and Palestine Solidarity Working Group, towards then blaming them for the amount of labor they haven't been able to focus on because of how they've been targeted. The amount of labor that I saw on display there tells me with full confidence you are able to do a national campaign and have a national convention. So if anybody says they don't have the time, well, they don't need to be the delegate. If anybody's saying they don't have the time, they don't need to be a leader in our organization. Because we need people who are prioritizing the health of a movement. And the largest banner in that movement is the DSA right now. And if they care about the integrity of these movements, they will fix this. And that's the question that we have to answer. So will the National Political Committee, because 3/4 of them would need to vote, where again, a majority say that they believe they have a mandate, will they vote to have a national special convention? If not, I have a feeling we might see that another way, because there's more than one way to call a special national convention. I am not in support of removing leaders who I disagree with, or who I even may think are harmful. Because we deserve, as a movement, the time and clarity to explain to folks what is happening, to act better right than fast. And the National Political Committee cannot credibly claim to have abided by that. So, yeah, anyway, that's just some of the stuff going on in the National DSA front.
There's a lot of stuff going on at the National DSA.
And I frankly hate it all. Like, I do not want people undermining the credibility of our grievance process. I do not want people to escalate this any more than it needs to be. And it didn't need to be like this in the first place. And it wasn't done by us. And not to mention the fact that we were led to believe there was a path towards de-escalation that ended up with the National Political Committee trying to have folks change the passwords of the working group, which didn't work. That is not how you earn trust. And the thing that I will say is that regionally, I am more than encouraged by the caliber of folks organizing, their thoughtfulness, and more importantly, how much they have been prioritizing their members' safety. So whether we get the socialism first in Illinois while the rest of the country's figuring it out, I'm okay with that if that happens, because we're the 6th largest state. but it doesn't have to happen. And I had a conversation with a member of my steering committee on Champaign-Urbana DSA, where they were asking if this formation would fold. This was a month or two ago. And I told them no, and if it were, we will cross that bridge when we come there, but I have a conflict of interest in that regard. I have more than one hat. And I believe in operating in good faith in another organization's space. So with this dynamic going on, with the local that we have fostered that is doing work that is punching way above their weight repeatedly, what is our future? What are the futures of the 200 chapters, 50 of whom previously already spoke out against the National Political Committee's decisions? So we know that there's basis for a convention. That's not enough for there to be a convention, to be clear. But that's a really good start in conditions that are less than clear. I believe people have that clarity now. So I just want to say to anybody who is in a chapter outside of Illinois, or just any other DSA affiliation formation, that just because national infrastructure is broken does not mean that we cannot organize our own. Organizations are meant to save us labor for realizing certain mechanisms. I believe that there are people of the caliber to where we can do that labor, where we can adopt what mechanisms we believed were unique to DSA in other spaces if we must. But I ask that before someone does that, that they try to prosecute a national convention, a special national convention. Because just like a member of the National Political Committee said in regards to this whole matter, they believed that before discipline was done, that all other means should be exhausted. And I believe in the upward delegation of discipline, we should follow the same. So if you are hanging on by a thread, just know that you're not alone. And please stay with us to try and fix this. We're not asking for 18 months. We're not asking for the next national convention. And I'm speaking as an individual here, although I hope not to be only in an individual capacity soon. But hopefully we will have a national convention before the end of summer to address this in full and to ensure that whatever is happening never happens again.
Cheers. Well, Allan, I think that that says it all.
Yep. Thank you for letting me go over time. Sorry about that.
No. That's not a worry. I appreciate that you came by and gave us your viewpoint on that. It seems like I had no fucking clue when you joined me today that you were in the middle of it. I didn't know. I thought you were just a DSA person who's going to tell me about what's going on. So I'm just going to say real bummer that you're personally embroiled in this. I hope that that thing is resolved and that them barring you from national leadership or whatever like that, I hope that that's resolved. You're saying the only way that that's resolved is through the special convention.
Yeah, and the thing is, like, me individually on that, like, if I could have recruited somebody else to be on the BDS and Palestine Solidarity Working Group a while ago, I totally would have. And the thing is, because we were under constant attack, more or less, in this way, it was not feasible to onboard somebody with all of the history and maintain that sense of trust, but we still built out the organization. And, you know, I'm more of a pinch hitter in this steering committee, but I am in solidarity with these folks, regardless of the fact of where my vote landed versus where their vote landed on this. I stayed with the formation, and get this, I'm staying with the formation, because just because National says we're gone doesn't mean that our Palestinian grassroots partners recognize that. And that's something we have to take very seriously.
It makes the work that much more important. Yes, more difficult, but that much more important.
Yeah.
Well, that's real sad that DSA is, I don't know, shit in the bed over BDS, shit in the bed over Israel. Israel's tearing apart every organization. Do you think that's why AOC cried at the Iron Dome vote? She knew it would lead to the destruction of DSA. That's hyperbole.
I don't know. I just wish that she would sponsor the Maintaining Access to Essential Services Act so that there is a clear line of representation to where when she passes a resolution, she also passes the legislation.
Wait, say that again. Say what? Slow it down for someone like me.
Yeah. AOC was a sponsor in the public power resolution by Bush and Bowman. And seeing her pass that, but not sponsor Rashida Tlaib's Maintaining Access to Essential Services Act, which would wipe utility debt for all households in the country, which would provide additional consumer protections, restore their utility services, prevent liens on their homes, and all this sort of stuff. She's not a sponsor. And so what am I supposed to think when someone's crying at the Iron Dome vote? When there's already words and actions not lining up. And I say this as somebody who's like, that's a busy job. It's a really busy job. The Senate one has no sponsors currently, but there's a House one that has sponsors, including Bowman. People think that just because I'm on the steering committee, I'm anti-Bowman. I'm not anti-Bowman. He sponsored a key piece of legislation to end no Ameren shutoffs, which is not a passion project. It's a project of crisis. So, yeah, when it comes to AOC and crying and stuff like that, I need to see more consistency to take someone's interactions sincerely to then read into their state of mind. And I say that with no ill will towards AOC, because she's in a system. She is operating in accordance with that system, and we know how that affects folks. And the thing is that if we were a stronger grassroots organization, maybe this wouldn't even be an issue. And when I say this, I mean the BDS aspect, I mean the utility shutoffs aspect, the pandemic as a whole, and yet here we are. So I just hope that she reconsiders and sponsors this legislation. I've left voicemails.
Yeah. I noticed Chewy Garcia on there. Is it?
Yeah.
That's my guy. I like Chewy. I want Chewy and Tlaib. That would be a great ticket. I'd vote very hard for that.
Oh, same. And here's the thing. The thing is, Chewy Garcia was not a sponsor on the public power resolution, but Marie Newman was. And she's not a sponsor of this yet either. So if we're looking at who do we talk to in Illinois,
all right,
it's Marie Newman.
Marie Newman, huh? She's not. She's not the leftist of the left, huh?
Apparently not.
Yeah. Well, what are you gonna do? Not everyone could be Chewy Garcia. That's
what we're gonna do.
That's what we're gonna organize. We're gonna organize. We're gonna try to do what our friend over here is doing. The accountability organizing. You don't have to have an entire organization behind you. You can get the organizations behind you. One person, not a cent. They don't even have a Twitter account, and you've helped to keep people's gas on. That's just phenomenal. It's just like it's real, and it just makes me go, should we abolish the National Political Committee? Should we just abolish it? It's getting in the way. You know what I mean? Should we just focus on the local stuff? I'm sorry. Is that an argument? That's just off the top of my head? All right, take that. Let's field that really quickly.
So no, I don't think that we should abolish the National Political Committee. I think that we should.
I've been thought through it.
Like the thing is, like I do have gripes with the National Political Committee as a structure. Every single member is at large. There's no geographical representation, which means accountability is hard and mostly done parasocially. Parasocial relationships are really difficult to have healthily, right? So now we have that as the functioning basis of our national organization. What the hell? So like when it comes to that, you know, there are arguments to be made to improve this system. But I think that the time to change what the structure is not during a crisis in confidence on a matter that is from their decision making. We should talk about that structural issue and organize on that structural issue. But we shouldn't take a shortcut and insert a different issue there. I believe that if we had members who were more attached to the unmoneyed grassroots level organizing that helped our organization flourish, because it sure wasn't top-down stuff that led to our membership increasing, otherwise it still would be. I would just say we needed more of them to run for the National Political Committee, and not enough people knew that. I didn't. And so what we need, again, with the Special National Convention, how this does not fall into the narrative of a coup, is it would allow the majority on the National Political Committee to reaffirm their mandate, if that is what they genuinely believe. It would allow the members in dissent to attempt to express no, the committee which is above the NPC, or the convention which is above the National Political Committee, disagrees, and to set the record straight. And should it be necessary, one could provide a resolution restricting the powers of the National Political Committee, because we do not need them for a core functional role of our organizing. We need them to stop disorganizing our members. That is what we need them to do. And so I think it is okay and acceptable to have there be either conditional or unconditional restrictions on the relationship to the NPC, to the convention votes, because we have to honor the will of our members. And if we are passing contradictory things, we should improve our convention. We shouldn't just use that as a way to have the National Political Committee write the book. That's not okay. And that's what people are perceiving. That is why people are resigning. If there was a process, even if folks were guilty of egregious things, if there was a process that was trustworthy and that had people's confidence and that had a track record of success, people would still be here. People would be willing to accept setbacks. But when you try telling Palestinian organizers that the National Political Committee isn't worth confronting because it's not safe or any version of that, which is something I am guilty of saying, they just look at you like you're fucking dumb. Because that's not a luxury that their relatives have. So we, as the organized left in America, need to actually treat this deliberately, considerately, and to make sure that we can restore confidence. That is not by removing or abolishing the National Political Committee.
Well, you don't like my ideas, I don't like your ideas.
That is left unity.
Exactly. No, I never take it personally when I'm wrong. That means I'm learning something. I'm just upset that I couldn't pull out a really great idea out of thin air. What are you gonna do? Obviously, no, that makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate that, Allan. Allan Max Axelrod, thank you for being with me today. You've been a great guest. I appreciate you sharing the story. I had no idea what I was getting into today when we scheduled this, and then when it all blew up this morning, and then I jumped on the message board, and then I learned that you're involved as well. Allan, thank you again for sharing your time with me and your experience. We got our fingers crossed that things improve. Especially, we just want to see a leftist organization get a W, and it just makes it feel like we're that much farther from it now, and that sucks. What are you gonna do, right?
Well, the good news is we're still in the alphabet, so let's keep trying. Solidarity, Dan.
Solidarity. Allan, thank you for joining me. We'll see you next time. Love your face. Bye now.
Bye.
That's Allan. Don't pay attention to that. Allan did a great job. Yay, Allan.